I'm going to kick things right off the bat with Poland Part 2, with me departing from Warsaw and entering Krakow. I left early morning from Ajo's flat with myself and my lonely backpack and went to the train station. Typically, when I'm alone in a situation like that, I usually, start talking to people and see if I can make conversation or some friends. Someone had adopted my version of doing things and started talking to me, and it turned out to be an Argentinian named Guido Lopez. Now, Guido was traveling to Krakow for very similar reasons that I was traveling to Krakow, to see the city, to explore. His time frame was a little different. He was planning to stay in Eastern Europe for a month and a half. Just to explore, to see a new place, and sort of to live the culture. He had a very interesting life. He was a bit older than me, about 5-6 years. He had worked as an accountant in Argentina before, and decided he did not really like where his life was going. He didn't enjoy being an accountant, and so he packed his bags, went to New Zealand, picked fruit there, until he amassed enough money to travel throughout Southeast Asia for a few months, and lived like a king because there was such a strong currency exchange, and now he's doing the same in Eastern Europe. So our paths met on this train ride, and we sat together and on the train and talked and decided, what, for these 2 days that we're going to be in Krakow together, let's hang out. I arrived then in Krakow, and I met up with what was been prearranged, basically a day or two before, the friend of a friend of a friend of mine. Aja had done some calling around and found a former friend of hers that would be willing to host me while I was in Krakow. And it was really sweet of her. As the train arrived, she kept sending me text messages. Okay, you're almost there. Do you know what stop to get off on? It was very motherly in a way. So I knew we would be friends before we even met. So Guido and I met, and her and her boyfriend as well, and we introduced each other, and then I headed off to her place to drop my stuff off, and Guido and I arranged that we would meet in Krakow at the Market Square about 4 p.m. later on in that afternoon. And so we did, and let me tell you, Krakow is the most beautiful Polish city I'd been in so far, and looking back on it now, it's the most beautiful city. It has the biggest market square in all of Europe. Just the buildings are incredible. It really avoided a lot of the wars that had gone through Poland, and really retained its original beauty. So Guido and I spent that afternoon and well into the evening just walking around, going everywhere, from the market square down different passageways and alleyways, and up to different churches and cathedrals. Here's one where I thought it'd be fun to take a little snapshot of each of the statues in front. I'm not quite sure what their significance is. You could say perhaps they're even disciples, but they look to be a little different. I'm not sure. Guido was very impressed by the size of the horses. I guess in Argentina they're a bit smaller. I'm not sure. We ended up going up to the, what was the name of it? I think Wawelek Castle, because that was one of the famous sights to see in Krakow, and saw the neighboring river from there. And then we walked through the Jewish Community Center, which was a little hidden trail which took us through the Jewish neighborhood. That was very interesting. I mean, it was a memorial keepsake to the Jewish that had been murdered throughout the wars and the Nazi occupation. We even went to the Oskar Schindler factory, and we arrived a little too late. Apparently, unfortunately, we couldn't go in. It had been converted into a museum, but it was pretty cool just being there and seeing that, what it was like. Again, many memorials in Krakow. It was very nice. So we came across a bridge, and I'd seen something I'd never seen before. It's happened a lot in this trip. As you can see, there are locks in the bridge, and there were just thousands of them spanning the bridge, with names and hearts written on them. So Guido and I hypothesized that perhaps when people get married, they put a lock on the bridge, symbolizing that they're together, locked, and they throw the key into the river. We never really found out exactly what the significance of these locks are, but we're working on it. We might have an answer for you someday soon. There's a little photo of my bed. It was so cool that I got to stay with Monica and Kuba. Really great hosts. I ended up coming back there late at night around 11 o'clock, and they were all still up. There were a few friends there also in the kitchen. We had a very good conversation. I ended up only knowing Kubak and Monica for a day and a half, but we understood each other so well. I felt like I'd known them for years. It was quite interesting. Very, very nice people, very gracious. I always wanted to make sure I was doing okay and had enough to eat and everything was comfortable, so I hope you can see this, guys. The next day I had to make a decision. Well, I made this decision the day before, and we decided to go to a place of extreme historical significance, namely Auschwitz in Poland. You all know what Auschwitz was all about, the infamous Nazi concentration camp that was part in murdering 6 million Jews and other minorities all across Europe. It was a very, very heavy place. And I'm very happy that I visited in the winter, because you could really feel the discomfort there. I mean, I felt like if we'd gone in the summer, it wouldn't have quite been the same. But just you could see, how barren everything looked, and there were they turned the buildings inside into sort of museum memorials, and there were different exhibitions at different places, different Ausstellungen. And there was one mound where you could see just a fraction of all the shoes that had been collected from all the people they'd murdered. Just a gigantic pile filling the entire room, just of shoes. Then you can see, and that was just a fraction of all the people that they had gassed. There were altogether 3 different concentration camps. There was the Auschwitz I, which we were at. There's also Auschwitz II, and then there's a place called Birkenau. Birkenau was much larger, and but basically the way it works, the train tracks lead right into the entrance, and so they would the train would drive in straight through into the Birkenau camp. They would unload everybody inside the carts, and the officers would go and see, look through who was there, and they would take about 10% of the people, the men that looked strong enough that they could do work, and the rest of the 90% they sent immediately to the gas chambers, and within an hour everyone was dead. They killed about 3,000 people a day that way, and those that didn't die were sent then to Auschwitz I or Auschwitz II to work in back-breaking, horrible conditions, and were also subjected to brutal medical experiments, just awful. Here you can see a memorial. This was known as, I believe, the killing wall, where in case any resistance broke out, this is where they shot them. This is really something everyone needs to see for themselves. People need to understand what happened here, because it was a real event in history. It wasn't happen that long ago, and it's actually genocide still happens in the world. And to begin to be able to grasp that, you do need to visit a place like this. I'm going to move on now to something a little more cheerful. This actually turned out to be my last of 2 days in Krakow, and so Guido actually came with me on this trip, and we went back together. I had a train that left at 10 o'clock somehow, and we got there at 8, so I ran, to Guido's hostel, which was called the Goodbye Lenin Hostel, and you can see from these graffiti on the walls, it was quite a fun place, and they had little different fun activities. The computer didn't work at Guido's place, so I ran to an internet cafe, did all my corrections that different people had sent me, and sent it off, and then ran, to meet Monica and Kuba, who had come with my backpack, because they said they would bring that from their place, and then we all met up, but we were late because I was late, and then we ran to the train station together, and on the way I realized I'd forgotten my gloves at the hostel, But I was like, what the heck? We ran, and made it within 5 minutes, and I was still able to buy postcards from Krakow. And here we said goodbye, and I hopped on the train and departed for Bratislava. Here in this overnight train, I fell asleep there in Poland, and I woke up in Slovakia. And we'll pick this up again when I wake up. Take care.